Hi, I'm Andrew with Metal Fabworks, and these are our Gen 2 ZSR vertical opening trail doors. Everything you see in front of you here represents one complete door. This happens to be a passenger front door. I'm going to go ahead and run through some of the features on this and also how to install it. Super easy install on these. All you need is basically any couple hundred piece mechanics tool set. Should have everything you need. If you are familiar with our Gen 1s, we have done some pretty major changes to these, and I'll go through a few of those now. Starting up here at the front, we have a completely new bushing design. This bushing is much larger, stronger, robust compared to the Gen 1s. The Gen 1s were a plate steel design, which required a lot of welding and fabrication, so we really worked on trying to get the price point down on these. They've been in development for a couple years now, so of course we've gone through a pandemic and everything and some supply chain issues. We really try to do our best with that. Another major design change on these is this door mount setup. On the original Gen 1s, you did have to use some supplied hinges that replace your factory hinges. On these are going to bolt on top of your factory hinges, which allows you to maintain factory alignment. So whenever you go to put your doors back on during the winter, it's going to be a much easier, faster process, no realignment or anything like that. So that's kind of a basic rundown on these. I'm going to go ahead and bring you in a little bit closer, and we'll go ahead and show you how to go through a hardware pack, get this door assembled on the bench, and then move over to the Jeep and show you how to put it on there and kind of how they work. So let's get started. I'm going to run through some real basic stuff on these. We've really done everything we can to make you guys install go as easy as possible. This is going to be a front door, and this is going to be a rear door. So the front doors are going to be a little bit longer, and the rear door is going to be a little bit shorter. On your mounts, and as far as deciphering which one's the front and which one's the rear, on the rears, they are going to have a longer, lower strut mount compared to the front doors. The other thing you could tell a difference on is there is an extra hole up here at the top, which will be countersunk on the back side. That is for front. So anytime you see a short strut mount and an extra hole at the top, you know you have a front mount. Telling left from right on the door strut mounts, there's a couple key ways to tell. These are going to be a passenger side mount, and have this bent tab here that is just formed sheet metal, and it has got a square edge on it. That's always going to go towards the inside of the vehicle, and then you have a welded on double shear tab here. This will always go towards the outside of the vehicle, as well as these two tabs correspond with your factory hinge mounts. So this would be a passenger side. This is going to go towards the inside, this to the outside, and then these will correspond with your hinge mounts. So you got two passenger side mounts here. Moving on to the hardware, these are labeled and will come just like you see here. We've kind of set them up in the order that you'll need them, need all the hardware. So if you kind of open it one pouch at a time, it'll make it a little easier to see where that goes. This is going to be a rear door, the thinner packaging, and then this is going to be a front door, which has the wider packaging so it can fit your backing plate there. Everything is going to be the same front to rear, except for one minor difference, which is going to be what that extra hole in the front mount is for, and that is for a rubber bump stop. You'll be using a bump stop on the front doors, but not the rear doors. Just a little bit of difference in geometry there, so the fronts required it, whereas the rears didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and set this rear stuff aside and go through this hardware pack and show you how to get a front door assembled. We like to work from one side of the hardware pack to the other. We like to start at this end down here, which is going to contain your backing plate. So I'll go ahead and run through these left to right and show you how each piece, where it goes and how it goes together. We'll get started here. I've already got this cut open. This is going to be your backing plate, which has built-in weld nuts already installed. It's going to go here, and that's really just to fill this area behind here. close it off, and it also provides an opportunity for you to color match this to kind of suit your taste. So we're going to get that hardware out, which are going to be 1/4 by 3/8 long, and they're stainless steel button head Allens. So you are going to want to put a little bit of anti-seize on those. We're not going to use the anti-seize here because these will come back apart at a later point, but for final assembly, just use some anti-seize, prevent those from galling up on you. So I'll go ahead and get this put in real quick. The next compartment you're going to come to is going to be your adjustable latch mount. We have the hardware for that, which the nuts are going to be serrated so you don't have to hold a wrench on the backside. For these bolts, you're going to need a 3/8 socket. You're going to go ahead and assemble this so that the corresponding 2 holes match up with the slots in the top of the mount. And then this front lip will match this front lip here. And one of the reasons we use these serrated nuts is so that later on you don't have to get a wrench under here when you have your latch installed. You just want to get it tight enough that it kind of holds its position, but also allows you to move it around a little bit. And then it's going to be the same for the next step on the actual latch. We'll get those tightened down just a little bit where we can still move it around, but it's not wanting to flop all over the place. That is what your latch mount is going to look like installed. So moving on from there, we're going to go ahead and get the latch itself out. And this is going to be a latch from a passenger front door, as indicated by the hardware pack. The actual trigger for the latch is going to go towards the front here. The latch is going to go behind your adjustable latch mount, and then you're going to want to pull those 2 bolts out that you're going to use to mount it. And on these bolts, these are what are called a stover or top lock nut. And there's a reason we use those. Your latch is going to go in with your lever towards the front and the latching mechanism towards the rear. So you're going to want to insert your bolt and washer from this side, and then go ahead and put the matching washer and stover nut on the back side. On the latch, if you needed to identify, if you took them out of the package and separated for some reason and you needed to know which side went where, they'll technically work on either side. We always like for the handle to be towards the inside of the vehicle, and then have the actual rubber part of the latch, because these are a 2-stage latch, towards the outside of the vehicle. So handle inside, rubber part towards the inside, or outside, excuse me, and then it will say Southco on this inside part here, which will face towards the outside of the vehicle as well. So that's an easy way to identify them. This one, you'll need a 7/16 socket as well as a 7/16 open-ended wrench, and kind of like this top one where we got it finger tight, or tight enough that it's not wanting to flop around. You kind of want to do the same on the latch for now, because we'll adjust it once we get the door on the vehicle. So this is really just to hold it in place. Once you have these, this will have some front to back adjustment as well as some angular adjustment there, and get that tightened down enough that it's not moving around, but also not super tight. The reason that we want to use stover nuts on this latch is because once a stover nut's tight, it's a mechanical fastener that will pinch the bolt. That will allow you to run this where You don't want to cinch this down as tight as you can get it, because this latch is in single shear, so it will prevent this mechanism from working. So once we get this on the vehicle and lined up, we'll tighten this down basically till it's tight, and then we'll back it off just a quarter turn or so. So it's enough where it's holding the latch in place, but also still allows it to function as a latch. For now, we'll call that done. It's got a little bit of movement in it so we can adjust it, and we'll move on to the next item in the hardware pack. The next item is going to be this crush sleeve. This one is going to go in here, so just like so. And that crush sleeve, again, the tolerances and the width and the spread on these is very important. You'll notice it when you get it, but we've determined a specific tolerance that this crush sleeve is wider than this bushing whenever it's pressed in. So if you were to do a very thick powder coat on there, it's going to make this door bushing tight. Moving on, that's a pretty complete door. The next thing you'll find is your tube cap. Again, this is assuming that your door is completely finished and going to be installed for the final time. These are just push-in tube caps. You may have to get a rubber mallet or a block of wood to tap that in. I'll go ahead and grab one of those now and get that tapped in. So you see that rubber cap kind of caps off the end of the door and makes it look a little bit more like a finished product. Next up in your hardware pack, you will have this rubber bump stop. As I mentioned earlier, these are only going to be for the front doors. To install that, you're going to need a 3/16 hex key. This is also stainless hardware, so you'll want to put a bit of anti-seize on that for final install. That is going to go in from the back side into the corresponding countersunk hole there, and then you're going to just tighten that down on your bump stop, again with a little bit of anti-seize, and that will be good for your front door. The rest of the hardware in the pack is also for your door mount. So this door is ready to go on. This bolt is going to be for your bushing. It's going to go from the outside towards the inside. I'm just putting it here for now, so when we move on to the Jeep, it'll be where we need it. Go ahead and get that just on there finger tight. And these two 3/8 bolts are going to go into your door hinges here and here. We'll get those installed on the Jeep in just a minute. The last bit of housekeeping you'll need to do before installing your doors would be assembling your struts. The body is going to go up, and then the shaft itself is going to go down towards the bottom strut mount. To assemble this strut, really straightforward. Again, these are going to come packed all as one piece that'll be labeled for which door they're for. The fronts are the same left to right, as well as the rears are the same left to right. One quick way to identify front to rear, they look the same dimensionally. So let's say you unpack these and then you take everything to powder coat after you test fit them. The front currently is going to end in a UV part number, and the rear is going to end in a UT part number. T as in Tom. So just in case that were to ever change, a quick way to tell would be the UT for the rear is going to have less pounds of force. So if you were to put them side by side and try and push down, one will push down, and that's going to be your rear. So I'm going to set that rear aside for now. And then the front, to put your ball joints in, the top or the body of the strut is just going to get a ball joint pressed in at an angle like that. Just put it a little bit of an angle and then apply a little bit of pressure. And then you're going to have your nut, which will be what fastens it to the actual door mount. Here on the other end, this end is going to get a seal protector, which there's a little groove that you can see it rides in right on the strut body. That's going to keep mud and debris out of the strut itself. So you'll see that there's a small hole in this, and it's got to go over this ball end here. So just going to apply a little bit of WD-40 to that, and then that will allow it to slide right over the top with a little bit of pressure. So slide that on, make sure it mounts up to the bottom there, and then lastly, to finish off the bottom, you will put in another ball joint on this side, just like so, and then put that nut on there so you'll have it when you go to install the door. And that is a strut that's ready to be installed on the front. So, all right, now that we got you over here at the Jeep, moving on to this mount, this is one of the key features, as I went over earlier, of the Gen 2 doors. This is going to mount over your existing factory door hinges, which is going to mean that these never have to come off and that you never lose your factory alignment. During summer, you want to put these on. These are going to go on over. These stay. Whenever you want to put your doors back on in the winter, just pull the door and this piece off. It'll already be adjusted to the Jeep itself, and your factory hinges will be there for your factory doors. So the first step is going to be, you're going to want this bolt here and this bolt here. That's going to be your middle bolt on your top hinge and your lower bolt on your bottom hinge. Those two bolts remain in place and hold all your alignment. So you're going to want to check to make sure those are tight, which these are here. And then your upper bolt and your lower bolt on your upper hinge and your upper bolt on your lower hinge will be removed. I'll go ahead and get these three off real quick. And now that I've ensured that those two are tightened, I'll get the other three off, and then we'll put the door mount on. Reuse them to install your door mount, which we'll do now. We'll go ahead and to set this on here. Just to get it aligned, we will grab a couple of the 3/8 bolts, drop those in from the top down, and then that will kind of hold it in place. So we'll go ahead and get our 3 bolts in here. This top one's a little tight with a bump stop, but it does go on. So we'll get those fingers started, and then go back and tighten them up once we've got them all in there and threaded where they need to be. All right, so we've got the door mount on now. I'll go ahead and remove this top bolt that we're going to use to fasten the door itself. Set that aside and then grab the door. Again, we have this latch loose here and the top loose so it can move in and out. And then we kind of just have it put right in the middle of the mount there. I like to set the rear onto the latch and then bring the front in here and come up from the bottom. And grab your bolt, it's going to go from the outside in. And this nut is also going to be a stover nut here on the front. And the reason we're using a stover nut there is similar to the reason we're using one on the back for the latch. We'll go and get this hand tight, and then I'll go over a little bit more on that. So this is going to be a 3/4 inch socket and open-ended wrench. And on that stover nut, as soon as it reaches the top of the nut, you'll feel some resistance. As long as you have it threaded properly, it's not cross-threading. That's just by design because it is a top lock nut. So it's kind of like a nylock, but a little more heavy duty. So right now that nut is already getting tight, even though there's this much slack in the bolt. So we're gonna go hand tight with these 3/4 inch ratchet and wrench, and then we'll throw a torque wrench on ours. If you don't have one, don't worry, we'll show you how to adjust that here in a minute. Now focusing on this latch, the first thing you want to do is we like to adjust this top depth adjustment in and out, and that's going to be a 3/8 wrench. And now you can kind of see why it's good to have those serrated nuts on the bottom, because you can just put a finger underneath there, and then that will allow you to move this in and out and get those tightened without having to try to get a wrench in here. What we are looking for here, we want to make sure this latch in its resting position basically lines up right in the middle of this striker. This one's pretty good here. If we need to, we can move it in and out just by kind of wiggling it, and we like to get that lined up first. We've got that right in the middle of the striker there, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten down these top adjusters. All right, so we got that tightened down there, and then the next thing you want to do is adjust this to where it is level, and front to back it is landing right in the middle of that striker without hitting the back of the striker here. So you basically just want to fall right into that clamshell there. So about right there is where we're going to want it. So I'll go ahead and get that, change over to a 7/16 and a 7/16 open wrench. And then again on these, we're going to tighten them down until they're tight, and then back them off about a quarter of a turn. But one final thing I like to do, everyone wants to get the strut on and see this thing move on its own, but the final thing I like to check before I go ahead and put that on is go ahead and test out the door. Just raise it by hand and then let it fall down without putting any side-to-side pressure, not guiding the door. See where that latch lands. And this one, since we adjusted earlier, obviously lands right in the middle, but if it were to not land in the middle, you would want to go ahead and adjust it before you put the strut on. So this is going to go ahead and check and make sure it's well clear of the roof, which it also is. So we'll go ahead and throw on the strut, and then we'll throw on the nuts on these 2 3/8 bolts, and that'll finish up the install on this particular door, and the process will just be repeated for the other 3 doors. Again, on this strut, the shaft side is going to go down, and then you will need 2 1/2-inch open-ended wrenches to go ahead and tighten those up, or a open-ended wrench and a socket. Go ahead and get that lower on real quick. And to put the upper strut on, you will want to open the door, and then the extended strut at some point will, about the time it contacts your rubber bumper, will go ahead and fit through there. Go ahead and get your top bolt put on, your top nut. So that door would be complete. I'm going to grab my torque wrench, and then we'll go over this bushing bolt here. Just to give you an example, we'll go ahead and set our torque wrench to 30 foot-pounds. So we got a 30 foot-pound torque on this, which is pretty light, but it's enough to prevent the door from having side-to-side movement. We'll go ahead and get that torqued. So that is 30 foot-pounds, and when you pop the door open, you can see there's barely any movement in there. So 30 foot-pounds allows the door to cycle cleanly, and then you're not fishing for your latch down here whenever you are closing it. If you did not have a torque wrench to go to 30 or 35 foot-pounds, you can just take a regular ratchet and then tighten it down till you get tight. Obviously we're at 30 foot-pounds or 35 foot-pounds now. When I go a little bit tighter on that, so that's pretty tight. That's probably 60 foot-pounds. And you see the door still cycles just fine. So that's obviously going to be a little bit even better at 60 foot-pounds. You don't have any wobble at all in the door. But if you were to go too tight, let's say you tighten it down to 100 foot-pounds, and for some reason the door went up and it cycled to there and then stopped. I'm holding this back. It wants to keep going, but if it were to come up like that and then stop, essentially you would come in with your wrench, and then while it's still down, just hold it and loosen it until it starts to move on its own, and then test it out, see if it cycles like you want it to, which obviously this one will. So a little bit of that is going to depend on your powder coat, you know, how much stiction you're getting. If you were to powder coat it or paint it, it's going to change that spread on that bushing. But they, you know, they're fixture welded. They should be good to, you know, anywhere from 35 foot-pounds up to about 65 foot-pounds. But if you have a problem where it's not opening up all the way, just go ahead and back off a little bit of torque on that bolt, and that stover nut's going to hold it to whatever you torque it to. Even if you don't have an exact torque spec, if you're just feeling it by a wrench, as long as you're 30 to 65 foot-pounds, it should be good. So that'll pretty much wrap up the install on these. If you have any questions, let us know. Area code 909-505-7115. And we hope you enjoy your doors, and send us some pictures of them when you get them installed, or tag us on Instagram, #FullMetalFabworks.